I am Alex Bádue, and welcome back. And I'll be chairing this this panel or the session, Groundbreaking Women in Production, Writing, and Marketing. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first presenter is Dean Adams, and he's the Senior Associate Dean of Performing Arts at UNC Charlotte, and he was the Producing Artistic Director of the Connecticut Theater Festival for 20 years. He contributed a chapter on the Disney's Broadway business practices in the recently published Oxford Handbook of the Disney Musical, edited by the two of the organizers of the conference, Dominic and Colleen, as well as chapters in the upcoming 50 key choreographers of stage and screen to be published by Taylor and Francis. So let's welcome Dean.
Before I begin, I also would like to thank Mark Horowitz of the Library of Congress for not only being a great host, but a scholar and a friend to all of us who study musicals. And to Dominic Brumfield McHugh for supporting and encouraging my early research. I'd like to thank Eva Price, Laura Little, and Nancy Gibbs for their insights on how they produce musicals. And finally, I'd like to thank my family members who have traveled from across the country, including my wife, Kristen, to see this presentation and to raise the stakes a bit. So when we think of Broadway producers, particularly of musicals, Mel Brooks's vision of Max Bialystock from The Producers comes to mind. The stereotype of the philandering egomaniac who raises money in questionable ways is drawn, if you believe Mel Brooks, from true models like Florenz Ziegfeld and David Merrick. Merrick, producer of hits like Hello Dolly and 42nd Street, was known as the abominable showman for his publicity stunts and knack for buying out other investors. He stated that, "Most people are weak. I respect no one but myself. There is no such thing as unfair. It is simply a matter of inferiority and superiority. I know more than most people, and I use it." Gosh, that sounds familiar. So the contemporary versions of this archetype might include Harvey Weinstein, brought down by the Me Too movement, Garth Drabinsky, convicted of defrauding his investors, and Scott Rudin, whose angry and sometimes violent behavior forced him to take a pause in Broadway producing. Historically, however, women producers have been a visionary force in musical theater, even if their contributions were not as loudly proclaimed. First, a quick primer on the types of Broadway producers. A lead producer is like the CEO of a company or the founder of a startup. They often find or discover the musical or play, whether they come up with the idea themselves or were handed the script by a writer. The lead producer is responsible for raising all of the money or capitalizing the show, overseeing the marketing, and finalizing the budget. They are generally listed in the playbill above the title. A co-producer is particularly important with expensive shows like musicals. Co-producers invest or raise a certain amount of capital to receive a preferred rate of return on investment, as well as perks that might include billing, which can make them Tony eligible alongside with the lead producer. They bring money to the table. Sometimes they have influence like a board member in a non-for-profit organization. Also important to note, while a lead producer may earn a royalty and an office fee, co-producers usually only earn money if the show recoups its capitalization cost. Executive producer is a relatively new function in the Broadway producing world. They are typically hired guns, experts in fundraising or marketing or production, who help the lead producers in those specific areas. We'll see in a moment that this role was likely created by Ruth Mitchell. Remember that only 20 to 30% of Broadway musicals pay back their investors. So according to the League of Broadway Producers, the profile of the frequent Broadway theater goer in 2023 is a 44-year-old white woman with an average household income of $275,000 who paid an average of $128 per ticket. In fact, women make up more than 2/3 of the Broadway musical theater audience. While this trend of female consumption of Broadway musicals has been consistent over the last several decades, we don't hear much about the women producing them. Yet women make up close to 30% of the lead producers in Broadway shows in 2018 and slightly higher in 2024. Compare this to 6.4% of Fortune 500 CEOs in 2018 to 10.4% in 2024. And yet, all 4 shows that won the top prizes at the 2024 Tony Awards featured women as first billed lead producers. As early as 1915, Elizabeth Marbury was a pioneering American theatrical and literary agent and producer. She helped shape business methods of the modern commercial theater and encouraged women to enter that industry. She offered such advice as, do not rent an opera box at first. Do not lease a house at Newport until you have substantial friends in the Berkshires and on Long Island. Above all, do not let any other woman discover you're intelligent. Conceal that fact as a crime. Be well dressed, but never too well dressed. Wear small pearls and not large ones. She also said, musical comedy lost its commonplace atmosphere, and through the joint efforts of my associates and myself, it was raised from the ranks into the realm of a different and better form of entertainment. After 2 years of continual failures at the Princess Theater, Ray Comstock was receptive to Marbury's idea of presenting a new kind of musical. According to Alfred Lewis in his book, Ladies and Not So Gentle Women, Marbury told Comstock that some of her French clients had been successful adding popular music to traditional farces, creating plays with music, small casts, and limited sets that could be performed in smaller venues. She imagined a musical that could be done at the Princess Theater, integrating the innovative parts of a book with dance and light music, and she was confident that it could find an audience. They formed the Marbury Comstock Company with the aim of producing this new style of musical at the Princess Theater, Broadway's smallest house at the time with 299 seats. A successful show from her English client Paul Rubens, Mr. Popple of Ippleton, was their first venture, though the title, locale, and music needed an American touch. The name changed to Nobody Home, and for the new songs, Marbury insisted on Jerome Kern, a promising young client. They Didn't Believe Me was one of the songs that became a hit for Kern. Marbury was not a passive producer. She knew society circles well and was active in promoting her production. In a letter and flyer sent to Colonel Waterston, she wrote, I want you to see my first effort of trying to change the character of the average, incomprehensible, so-called musical comedy. If you will accept a box any night, let me know, and I shall see that it is sent to you with my compliments. While Marbury was only directly involved in producing the first 2 Princess musicals, the other being Very Good Eddie, she was responsible for the form and style for the shows that followed. The Princess musicals were typically produced for $7,500, about 1/6 of the cost of the more extravagant productions of the day, like the Ziegfeld Follies, capitalized at over $50,000. She is primarily responsible for the discovery of Cole Porter, which she stated was the most promising composer of light opera, and despite the doubts of the Schubert brothers, continued to represent him. In the spring of 1915, Marbury approached Porter for songs for a show that would eventually become Porter's first Broadway musical, See America First. In the letters of Cole Porter, edited by Broomfield, McHugh, and Eisen, Porter's excitement about Marbury was noted in telegrams to family members. Check arrived last week, thank you. Got offered to write Junior League show for next year. Could not arrange meeting with committee until Monday night. Will come home as soon as possible. Meeting Miss Marbury tomorrow. Love, Cole. Marbury delighted. Production assured for next year. Meeting Weber and Fields manager tomorrow in regard to interpolating several of my own songs in their new show. Meeting Junior League committee tonight. Leave home tomorrow afternoon. Cole. And just returned after 6 days with Marbury. Show to be produced in October. Tell Granddad Lou Fields gave me $50 for each song I sold him and 4 cents on each copy. Found your wire waiting. Thank you so much for writing. Cole. In an interview with the New Haven Register, Marbury predicted Porter's success. I consider Cole Porter, your Yale graduate who is now writing his first professional music, the most promising composer of light opera that I have ever encountered. declared Miss Elizabeth Marbury, the well-known dramatic agent and producer. Miss Marbury was the one who first induced Mr. Porter, who graduated from Yale only last year, to write for the profession. I am convinced that Mr. Porter is one man of many who can measure up to the standards set by the late Mr. Arthur Sullivan. This looks like a boast, but watch him. In her memoir, Marbury wrote that we had put a certain deserted theater upon the map, we had introduced a novelty and had popularized a composer. We had proved that a small, intimate, clean musical comedy, devoid of all vulgarity and coarseness, could be made financially successful. After a few seasons, satisfied with my experiment, I quit and thereafter refrained from making any further productions. Politics became a more exciting theater than anything she was producing, and she returned to the American Play Company to handle only projects that interested her and to serve clients that needed her. Cheryl Crawford had an amazing career, first working for the Theater Guild with co-founder Teresa Helburn, who, among other achievements, conceived turning Green Grow the Lilacs into the musical Oklahoma. Crawford told Helburn at an audition that, "I really want to produce." When Helburn reminded her that she was interviewing for an acting school, she responded, "Yes, I know. I've acted and will if I have to. But I really must learn about the professional theater, and I know the Theater Guild is the best group." Crawford later became one of the three founders of the group theater with Harold Clurman and Lee Strasberg. She learned the ropes of producing at the group theater before resigning in 1937 to become an independent producer of over 70 plays, including 9 musicals. In 1947, together with former group members Elia Kazan and Robert Lewis, she founded the Actors Studio. Her ability to recognize and nurture unconventional talent and material contributed to the rich tapestry of mid-20th century American theater. She produced Brigadoon after every other producer passed on it, except for Billy Rose, who wanted total control over the material. The favorable reviews of Brigadoon brought attention to the newly minted producer in skirts, as the press referred it to her. A newspaper article at the time quoted her as saying, "A play producer takes more chances than anyone on earth and winds up with more wooden nickels. We stick to it only because it's in our blood, I guess." Commenting further for the reporter, she explained, "What did I do to get me here? A ton of nerve and the same philosopher a gambler has." But when she won her bet, as she did with Brigadoon, she shared her winnings. She gave her cast of 62 what no performers had ever expected from a producer: hospitalization insurance, a week's vacation with pay, and even professional development in the form of free acting lessons from Lee Strasberg. Her shows, ranging from revivals of Porgy and Bess to original works like Brigadoon, Regina, One Touch of Venus with Mary Martin, Paint Your Wagon, and her final musical production of Celebration in 1969, all showed taste and daring. She did famously pull out of producing West Side Story, and there are 2 letters that were on display here at the conference, one from Crawford to Arthur Lawrence and the other from her to Roger Stevens, both in the Roger Stevens collection. She articulates her concern that Lawrence's book did not articulate the individual characters well. Robert Griffin and Hal Prince took over the producing reins, which brings us to Ruth Mitchell. Like Crawford, Ruth Mitchell learned every aspect of production before she was a producer. After stage managing many Broadway productions, including Wrangling Children in The King and I, Ruth Mitchell worked exclusively for 40 years with Harold Prince. They met while Mitchell was stage managing West Side Story after Hal Prince took over as producer. She became increasingly valuable to Prince on his subsequent productions, that by the time It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman opened in 1966, Mitchell began to share credit as producer. Prince wrote that with Superman, Mitchell, his right hand, became associate producer in charge of all technical elements of the production, and he never worried about them again. Almost imperceptibly, she also moved into the role of an assistant director. Prince was stingy in giving credit, so this was significant. Stephen Sondheim had complained to him in 1992 that As to your theory about credit, have you ever known me to be concerned about such things? I mean, now don't you get angry. Who insists on printed directorial credit, whether professional or amateur, even those productions that may have nothing to do with the original? Prince's business relationship with Mitchell deepened by the time they began work on Sondheim's company. Mitchell, despite the fact that she didn't like raising money, was responsible for over 25% of the capitalization of the production. Her handwritten notes on the money she raised for company and Follies are in the Ruth Mitchell papers at the New York Public Library. Close to $40,000 on company and $91,000 on Follies. In a letter to Mitchell, Prince wrote, "Since you have assumed a great deal more responsibility on company than we had first contemplated, it seems only fair that you should share the management fee. Accordingly, I propose commencing with the week beginning April 27th, 1970, we divide the producer's management fee on the New York company, one half to you and one half to me." This fee did not include the royalties Prince would receive for company, but the letter did enclose a stipulation that Mitchell would be entitled to half of the same producer's management fee on any touring productions of the musical. Her presence on these productions represents the fact that the tide of prejudice mentioned by Oscar Hammerstein in his 1950 letter to Mitchell had begun to turn, and the presence of women on production teams was more commonplace than before. In each subsequent Hal Prince production, Ruth Mitchell assumed the role of executive producer. I think executive producer is a title I made up. Well, it's somebody who really takes care of seeing the production is handled. That is, everything that goes on, mainly from backstage, from the curtain back. I'm terrible at raising money, so I don't like to do any of that. I'm not good at it. On this one, I was doing the casting and seeing all the elements, making the director happy, and seeing that the production goes together. That's the costumes, the scenery, the lighting, the crew, everybody that has anything to do with backstage. Ruth Mitchell laid the groundwork for many women that followed, women who worked their way through stage management, company or general management to become co-producers and producers. Today, some of these have started in the not-for-profit world, like Mara Isaacs. Isaacs, who followed such legends as Hallie Flanagan of the Federal Theater Project and Teresa Helburn of the Theater Guild, she was one of the lead producers of Hadestown. Or Mandy Hackett, director of the Public Theater Productions, who helped develop Hell's Kitchen and Girl from North Country. The not-for-profit world has seen a shift in the balance of governing boards as well. In 2013, the gender of not-for-profit theater governing boards was 55% male and 45% female. That flipped in the last year, with 43% men, 54% women, and almost 3% non-binary members of the board. Eva Price took an unusual path to producing. She was working as an assignment editor at ABC News when she helped a friend put an off-Broadway show. I didn't have any family money or a wealthy husband or wife, but I just networked my face off, got a hold of properties, got a hold of investors, and eventually everything got bigger and better. She firmly believed that a radical rethinking of Oklahoma belonged on Broadway, as well as a recent production of Redwood with Idina Menzel, because it matters. Unfortunately, that show will be closing on Sunday. She has survived the ups and downs of Broadway producing by carefully strategizing road productions like Anne Juliet and Jagged Little Pill. It's easier to make money on the road than it is in New York because you operate on guarantees, and in New York you operate on gross ticket sales. And tours tend to be much cheaper. I believe that investors deserve to make money by believing in a show. I have no idea how to make a killing, but I have absolutely figured out how to make a living. Do the work, roll up the sleeves, take the chances, and you can survive. Even the women who could be categorized as celebrity producers have taken risks or forged new musical material, like Angelina Jolie in The Outsiders, Oprah Winfrey in The Color Purple, Candy Spelling in Hell's Kitchen, and Hillary Rodham Clinton and Suffs. Today, the power wielded by women who are lead producers cannot be ignored, not only on artistically adventurous projects, but also on big budget productions. This includes Jill Furman, Hamilton, Mara Isaacs, Hadestown, Sue Frost, Come From Away, Barbara Whitman, A Strange Loop, Eva Price, Redwood, Stacy Minich, Dear Evan Hansen, Carmen Pavlik, Moulin Rouge, Margot Lyon, Hairspray, Aaliyah Jones Harvey, currently the only black lead producer on Broadway, Ain't Too Proud, Susan Rose, The Band's Visit, Sonia Friedman, Merrily We Roll Along Revival, Kristen Caskey, American Utopia, Daryl Roth, Kinky Boots, Stephanie McClellan, The Book of Mormon, the late Elizabeth Ireland McCann, Passing Strange, and Carol Shorenstein Hayes, Fun Home. Each of these women has added to the legacy of Elizabeth Marbury, Cheryl Crawford, and Ruth Mitchell. In the high-stakes world of Broadway producing, women over the last century have made significant contributions to the art form, and the percentage of women lead producers may someday come close to matching the majority female audience on Broadway. Sue Frost, producer of Come From Away, teaches a producing class at Columbia University and reports that 9 of the 10 students in her recent class were women. In her Tony Awards acceptance speech, Eva Price said, "We are living through difficult times, but we have to be hardy and we have to be tough because the sweet and tender things in life can happen and they're too wonderful to miss." Despite the challenges of sexism in the still male-dominated business world, women are making inroads. Initiatives like the Broadway Women's Fund have been working to elevate women producers and replace the old stereotypes with women who value innovation, quality art, and ethical behavior. When asked if Broadway is still a sexist place to operate, Sonia Friedman had this to say: "I think that if it's sexist, those guys have to keep their mouths shut, don't they? It's not their time anymore. And my God, doesn't it feel good?" Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That was great. I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question since I have the mic.
Okay.
I probably this is just me, but I tend to think of, like, in the early 20th century, producers were still coming from the practice of producing, but also acting, also being part of the production. And I was curious about the background of Marbury, if she had any, what did she come from in terms of being in the theater? Like, was she a performer as well?
She was not a performer, and she came really kind of through the back door representing a few people, and then a few more, and then a few more, and she had a very good business sense. So she is, the records here for at the Library of Congress for the American Play Company, I mean, it's just vast, the amount of material that is there. But she was not a performer. She resisted the society label, but she knew society very well, and she knew how to negotiate.
Nice. Thank
and
you.
She was very charming, from what I understand.
Yeah, the picture was great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was just a wonderful paper and incredibly important history and contemporary change to document. I'm curious, in terms of the women who are working today, if you know anything about mentorship or networks or how they got where they got. I mean, I know Mara Isaacs, who I'm also happy to say is a friend, really cut her teeth by working at McCarter Theater, as you showed, for so many years, and then went out on her own as a producer. And but I'm curious if you know, do these women help each other? Do they see themselves as mentors to other women, and maybe especially women of color who are interested in becoming producers? And we think about the Old Boys Network, so I'm just wondering if you see any kind of networking here.
Right. You've taken me back a few days, because my entry into theater was in the 1970s at Arena Stage with Zelda Fitchandler. The regional theater way in has gotten much more difficult than it was then. These women do, I mentioned Sue Frost, many of them teach at university and are encouraging and mentoring people that way. The real education for a producer has to come from understanding production. And so having a knowledge of production and how shows are put together is really critical today, particularly if you're going to do musicals. And so for a lot of these women who are mentoring women who want to be producers, they're telling them, you've got to get in there. You've got to actually understand how these shows are put together. Stage manage a show, work in a general management office, work in these places where the actual work is being done in creating the shows, because you can't afford to misspend money on these. And the more you understand about production, the better and the better producer you're going to be. And Eva Price has really sort of said that to everyone who asks her, you know, how do you get into producing? How do you do that? Because she was not trained as a producer, but she knew how to put things together. And working for ABC News and as assignment editor, you know how to get things done quickly. But she started very small off Broadway and then did a couple of other things so every step along the way it built in terms of what the capitalization costs were so that the risk would be reduced as well.
We have time for one more question or more questions.
Thank you. You know, I love this stuff about the business of Broadway because I think any of us that have ever had any kind of interaction with actual theatre know that the whole business about, is it the words, the music that come first, it's the contracts. It's so true. And the money and all of that stuff, and that's what was coming through with Julie Taymor the other day. In terms of producing, do you think that it's a largely middle-class pursuit, or is that not a fair assumption? We were hearing about class in one of the papers earlier in the day, and I was really pleased about that because I think it's something we don't talk about enough in this general area, and it seems to me that it's an aspect of the kind of socialization of becoming a senior person in the theatre in general. But is it the case that it's a particular problem for producers or not, or is it a horrendous question because how would you know? Or this is just what was going through my mind. Sorry.
Well, a lot of it does have to do with the money and how you are going to network to raise it. But the way you do that is by showing the work that you've done, again, on each level as you go through. It's not as much of a class thing here as it might be in the UK. But it isn't, you know, that whole stereotype about having rich people, and rich people are the ones who are funding theater, isn't really accurate. A lot of these shows are capitalized with scores of people putting in as little as $25,000 or as much as $1 million. And these things take years, 3, 5, 10 years to do. And so you have to have access to enough money to at least get to the workshop phase and do that. So it's, once you get to Broadway, there's no looking back. It's going to cost for a musical 15, 20 million or more. And so now you are with the big money, and you better be ready.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next speaker is Samantha Lampe, and she's a PhD candidate in the Musicology program at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Her dissertation research focuses on Broadway's relationship with the New York state government as musical theater became a central attraction of the I Love New York campaign in television commercials and travel packages from 1978 to 1983. And her talk today is on Evita. So let's welcome Samantha.
Thank you, everyone, and I also would like to thank the Library of Congress and everyone for StageStruck for putting this event together. I really appreciate the support for all of our research within musical theater, and especially at times like this. So here we go. How do we solve a problem like Evita? All right, so when Evita premiered on Broadway on September 25th, 1979, its reception could easily be described as a spectacle. Negative reviews contained splashy headlines such as Evita, a bold step backward, or The Gilded Argentine. Even though Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice wrote the musical as a cautionary tale, most of the reviews criticized how Evita glamorized the fascist regime. As it staged a politically challenging debate between Eva Perón and the antagonist Che Guevara, Evita could not rely on the infamously harsh opinions of New York critics for promotion as Broadway hoped to attract international tourists. However, Mary Bryant, the musical's marketer, saw the theater industry shift towards tourism as an opportunity to experiment with the possibility of a multimedia campaign that would eventually glamorize the heroine with a Cinderella story to entice a broad new audience. Building on Jessica Sternfeld's work that explores the reception history of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musicals, I will examine how Mary Bryant's marketing campaign created another way to perceive Evita through the multimedia promotional materials. First, I will compare how Evita introduces Ava on stage with Oh, What a Circus to how New York critics perceived its political message. Then I will explore how the First American Congress of Theater, or FACT, in 1974 influenced Broadway's marketing strategies. And then finally, I will analyze how Bryant's promotional narrative that connected celebrity culture and female empowerment catered to tourists in print, interviews, and the television commercial. Analyzing the marketing materials for Evita from Mary Bryant's collection at the New York Public Library reveal how her multimedia promotional tactics for New York tourists constructed a glamorous narrative for the musical that was separate from the songwriter's political intentions. As Evita begins with the titular character's funeral, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice introduce the audience to Eva Peron through the antagonist character Che Guevara as he sings Oh, What a Circus.
Sing, you fools, but you got it wrong. Enjoy your prayers because you haven't got long. Your queen is dead, your king is through. She's not coming back to you. Show business kept us all alive since 17 October 1945. But the star is gone, the glamour's won't thin. That's a pretty bad state for a state to be in. Instead of government, we had our stage. Instead of ideas, a perimeter on his range. Instead of help, we were given a crowd. She didn't say much, but she said it loud.
As he interrupts the procession of mourners, the antagonist's dramatic litany outlines the negative impact of the Peron's fascist regime and sets the tone for the rest of the musical. The opening reflects the songwriter's goal, as Andrew Lloyd Webber stated in a 1979 interview that, quote, "We regarded this piece as a cautionary tale. It was written in England in 1975. It may well be a product of our concern about the dangers of extremism getting a toehold in Britain," end quote. Rice adds to the composer's point with, quote, "What we are really saying is that if you have a demagogue or a fascist dictator or somebody who seeks to manipulate people, it's even more dangerous if they are attractive and beautiful. And in order to get this over, you've got to show why Eva Peron was able to fool so many people so often," end quote. However, their goals were muddled in the musical's reception, as Walter Kerr wrote a scathing review for the New York Times that said, quote, "Ava had been glamorized to the point where fascism itself seemed a fairly harmless, minor aberration," end quote. Stuart Klein of WNEW-TV added that, quote, "Eva Peron was a part of a fascist dictatorship that suppressed opposition, closed critical newspapers, and tortured political prisoners. But in this show, she resembles Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. Oh yes, you might think Ava was guilty of nothing more than using the wrong salad fork," end quote. Neither review picks a particular moment in the show that glamorizes the heroine. However, their opinions would not only have been influenced by what they saw on stage, but also by Mary Bryant's celebratory marketing materials that ranged from a biography of Eva Peron in their playbill to radio commercials with American Express. Plans for transforming Broadway's marketing strategies began years before Evita premiered in New York. In June of 1974, the League of New York Theaters and Producers organized the First American Congress of Theater, or also known as FACT, to reevaluate the direction of the theater industry. Its main goal focused on creating a sustainable audience base for Broadway through new marketing strategies, government aid, and transferring productions. FACT's plans resulted in the League collaborating with the New York State government on the I Love New York tourism campaign in 1978. Until the 1970s, Broadway's ineffective promotion strategy relied almost entirely on the opinions of New York critics, which were managed by a press agent. Typically, only local audiences paid attention to the New York critics as they were familiar with the writer's expectations. If the League wanted to attract tourists, productions needed new tactics to engage international audiences with broader taste. According to After the Fact, a report on the First American Congress of Theater, speakers provided some new ideas for promoting shows at the panel dedicated to marketing. League member and former Broadway press agent Harvey Sabinson explained the reality, quote, "There is an urgent need for press agents to change with the times, acquire expertise in marketing techniques beyond news releases and print advertising, learn far more about the production of radio and TV promotional spots, and work with specialists who have such skills," end quote. Instead of relying on one source, the speakers suggested multimodal forms of advertising to attract new audiences. Resulting from the discussions of the 1974 FACT conference, Mary Bryant became one of the main theatrical press agents who embraced these new marketing tactics with her spectacle-filled campaigns for Broadway musicals, such as On the 20th Century and Sweeney Todd. After the producer Robert Stigwood hired Mary Bryant in February of 1979 for the Broadway production, she organized an extensive plan for Evita that replaced Lloyd Webber and Rice's intentions of a political cautionary tale with a campaign that glamorized wealth, female empowerment, and celebrity culture. Reframing the musical with the themes of luxury and excitement aligned with the vision of the I Love New York tourism campaign that launched nationwide commercials in 1978. An office memorandum in 1982 for Evita's media plan plainly states this goal, quote, "Reaching the markets that travel to New York is of primary importance," end quote. The Broadway theater seat assignment list from the show's first week of performances reveals the importance of tourism, with the American Society of Travel Agents and the New York Convention and Visitor Center receiving a couple hundred orchestra section tickets each as well. During the first season, radio commercial collaborations with American Express and the Plaza Hotel connected the Evita to luxurious travel experiences as well. Since most of the public was not familiar with Juan and Eva Perón's fascist dictatorship, Bryant introduced the musical to potential audiences by comparing the plot to a Cinderella story to make it approachable to New York tourists. Besides the rags to riches narrative, the campaign connected Evita to the women's liberation movement by presenting the heroine as an icon of female empowerment. Even though the marketing plan clearly stated, quote, "to not use any political reference to the musical," end quote, it redefined Eva's role in the fascist regime as being in, quote, "a position that made her the most powerful woman in South America, if not the world. And she did many good things, such as working to give women the right to vote in Argentina," end quote. Significantly, the marketing materials focus on glorifying Eva while barely mentioning the antagonist Che, who is vital in criticizing the fascist regime through the whole 2-hour show. To communicate this narrative, Evita's campaign drew upon several tactics that were suggested at the FACT conference, which included focusing on tourists, creating a counter-narrative to the critical reviews and promotional materials, and most importantly, replacing print ads in local newspapers with national television interviews and commercials. With the ephemeral nature of theatrical performances, the physical promotional materials and repeated commercials for Evita played a significant role in framing Eva Perón's cultural narrative beyond Lloyd Webber and Rice's intentions. A striking example for the construction of Eva Perón's biography as a Cinderella story can be seen in the timeline handout that Bryant made as a playbill insert, and audiences could read it as they watched the musical. Following the rags to riches narrative, the playbill timeline introduces Eva through her impoverished childhood as she left, quote, behind forever the dullness of small-town life, and moved to the exciting city of Buenos Aires in 1934, where she, quote, manages to scrape together a living working in nightclubs and the theater, end quote. Eva's motivations for seeking power is framed in a familiar way for New York tourists, as Bryant emphasized the heroine's humble beginnings, which could make the Perron's authoritarian actions in Act 2 appear less problematic. Communicating Eva's ascent, the timeline selected verbs that contrast her humble beginnings. For example, her role as an entertainer changed as the heroine's, quote, theatrical career advances on theater and in films, end quote. And once she became Juan Perron's mistress, quote, Eva rose to become one of the highest paid actresses in Argentina's Radio Belgrano, end quote. Echoing the themes of the American dream, Eva's rise into power resulted from her financial success, and the timeline avoided criticizing any of her political connections. Once the Perrons hold power over Argentina, the timeline positively frames the protagonist's efforts as, quote, she found her social aid foundation, where she worked unflaggingly distributing gifts and money to the poor and hungry, end quote. Based on this description, she looks more like a humanitarian than a fascist leader, as the word selection paints a sympathetic picture that ignores the valid criticism that the antagonist Shay sings about in this Act 2 song, and the money kept rolling in, therefore reframing Eva's narrative. As she transitioned away from the traditional print media and the opinions of critics, Bryant scheduled interviews and song performances with televised talk shows for Evita star Patti LuPone to share more about the creative process along with the songs from the musical. In a 1980 interview with Merv Griffin, Patti LuPone adhered to the goals of Bryant's campaign by attempting to minimize Evita's political message and frame the heroine as an example of female empowerment. After giving an emotional performance of Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, LuPone shared her view of the musical by first minimizing the weight of her opinion through her role as an actress. Quote, my view of Eva Perón is strictly theatrical. I have to perform within the framework of the text. That's my responsibility. I'm not into politics. And because I have to play her every night, I have to like her, because if I didn't like her, the audience wouldn't like her, and it would be 2 hours of boredom, end quote. Similar to the other marketing materials, LuPone attempted to separate herself from any political stance through her role on stage by claiming to just be an actress who is following the directions of the text, and that she needs to empathize with Eva for the audience's sake. Despite claiming multiple times in the interview to not be into politics, LuPone elaborated further on her view. Quote, I don't think Eva Perón was an evil woman. I think that the woman accomplished a great deal in a period when women could not. Now, she may have been more ruthless than the military, and she was called Juan's hatchet woman. She did remove people when they got in her way, but what I don't think she did is change the politics of the country. I think she simply learned the game and played the game the way it was being played, end quote. Evita premiered in the United States during the women's liberation movement, so LuPone's points about gender would have resonated with some of the audience members. She argued that Eva made her decisions based on the limited options available to her in an oppressive system. By stating that she simply learned the game, LuPone conflated Eva Perón's fascist actions of removing people from positions and making authoritarian decisions with the goals of female empowerment. As women tried to attain power through political and corporate positions, their lives would have echoed the narrative that the actress attempted to spin in the interview, even as the comparison is extremely problematic. At the center of Evita's campaign, the lavish television commercials made the marketing for the musical memorable for years to come. The commercial highlights 2 hits from the musical, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, and Buenos Aires. Besides being popular songs that are repeated throughout the musical, They both play important roles in critiquing Eva's relationship with the city and nation on stage as she rose into power. In order to fit the campaign's narrative that glamorizes the protagonist, the television commercial removes most of this commentary as it attempts to appeal to a broad market filled with tourists.
To ask for.
The truth is I never left you, all through my wild days, my mad existence.
That's right, Evita. Stamp your feet and clap your hands. You've got a lot to celebrate. 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. For Evita, Argentina's instant queen, an overnight saint. And only a few seem to notice she simply seduced a country.
Stand back, Buenos Aires, because you want to know what you're gonna get in me. Just a little touch and just one little touch. Just a little touch, just not one tease.
Evita at the Broadway Theater.
To build a sense of suspense, the commercial begins in the dark with the camera cutting to 3 different crowds chanting Evita without showing the titular character. This intense moment effectively introduces the campaign's narrative of glamorizing the powerful protagonist by first showcasing her adoring fans. After introducing the crowds, the camera then shifts to reveal the reason for their excitement. Eva Perón singing "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" as she reaches her arms out and blows a kiss to the people to replicate the choreography of an emotional speech. The commercial briefly highlights Che, who criticizes how she did not fulfill her promise of being there for her people. His remarks are countered with the camera quickly cutting back to Eva as she sings over the swelling melodic line, "The truth is I never left you." Through the lush music and Lapone's powerful voice, the scene appears to be a mutual claim of devotion between Eva and her fans, thus continuing to present the Perons in a favorable light. Once Eva finishes her speech, the screen fades with a dreamlike blurriness and then refocuses on Lapone and the ensemble dancing to Buenos Aires. After celebrating the musical's accolades, the announcer says, quote, "Argentina's instant queen, an overnight saint. Only a few seem to notice she simply seduced the country," end quote. On top of calling her an instant queen and a saint, the use of the word seduced negates the impact of the fascist regime with a sense of thrill that the word would connote. Any critique of Eva Perón remains brief as she confidently commands, "Stand back, Buenos Aires," and then entices the public by exclaiming that she is exactly what they want, just a little touch of star quality. The visual display further alludes to the rise of Eva's celebrity status, with each repetition of the phrase presenting a moment in her Cinderella story, by beginning with a younger Eva and finishing with her dress to the nines. With a glamorous Evita singing the line "star quality," it not only communicates her goal of attaining wealth and power, but also her success in doing so. For Bryant's campaign that hoped to make Eva Perón attractive to a broad market, these last 10 seconds crucially sell this glamorous image. Reacting to the New York critics right after Evita's Broadway premiere, Andrew Lloyd Webber placed his faith in their complex work and the audience by saying in an interview, quote, "We conceived it as a piece in which information would be laid at the audience's feet. They would then make the judgment, hopefully, that this is the sort of political figure who one has got to guard very strongly against," end quote. With the League of New York Theaters and Producers' goal of attracting as many tourists as possible and Bryant's multimedia campaign that glorified Eva, that would not be the case for this production. This can especially be seen in the musical's political history, as the conservative movement that Lloyd Webber and Rice warned about had embraced it by the middle of the 1980s. Political and corporate leaders from Margaret Thatcher to Donald Trump have publicly shared their adoration for Evita's glamorous narrative multiple times, and Ronald Reagan once said, quote, There's talk that I don't understand foreign affairs. That's not true. I've seen Evita twice. End quote. Even though none of the reviews criticized the impact of Evita's multimedia marketing or the campaign's narrative, it influenced how critics and audiences perceived the musical on stage, as they were able to re-engage with the promotional materials long after they left the theater. Thank you.
Awesome. This was amazing. I have a lot of questions because I'm a South American, but I just taught a class on music in oppressive regimes in South America this semester, and so going back to Evita now, just with all this fascinating. And I will just say real quick that if you go to Buenos Aires, you go to the La Recoleta, you can actually visit her tomb, and there's a whole tourism thing around her presence in Buenos Aires.
Mary Bryant was also contacted for that sort of stuff too.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I was just curious if you have thought about maybe this is beyond the purpose of what you're doing, but you mentioned Reagan and Alex. I'm curious if you've thought about the politics behind it of the United States, looking at Latin Americans, reframing our narratives.
Yep.
And of course, the U.S. funded a lot of the oppressive regimes in South America. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure if Brian would be, but I'm thinking you as the historian and the musicologist, what your thoughts are. Yeah.
Yes. So this fits into a larger narrative in multiple ways. So first, I did not talk about the director Hal Prince's vision of all of this. So his vision for Evita was that it was a metaphor for the use of the media and how a star was, how we understand a star through the ultra use of media. He uses that metaphorical trope, actually, I've noticed multiple times, starting with Cabaret, and then he does this with Evita. He also does this with Kiss of a Spider Woman, and the sense of othering through this sense of metaphor of like warning about this is happening somewhere else and this could happen here in the United States. So yes, I've definitely thought about that, and that is written as a part of the dissertation that is not in here. I had to include only a couple of the creators. So yes, that is definitely a part of it. Another part of it is with the larger I Love New York campaign is that there are international promotional tours of the I Love New York campaign, and South American countries are a huge part of the promotion too, where they're inviting Broadway casts to go and sing for travel agents down there and sing to just people within South America to then, yes, come to New York to see these shows. So yes, it definitely fits into that larger narrative. So thank you so much for that question.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, more questions. Yes, Kelly. Or Colleen.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you so much for this paper. I'm curious, and it's totally okay if you haven't thought about this, but I'm wondering how much this framed the way the film was framed.
Yes. So the film, I watched it once, and then I've tried to put it like somewhere in the background. Because Madonna adds a whole other layer to this as well. But something like so Bryant's campaign, I've looked at materials. There are materials between her collection at NYPL and then Schubert Archive as well in New York. That spans from 79 all the way to 85. And as we continue going throughout the 80s, it's more and more of this message of do not mention politics, and really focusing in on that celebrity image, especially with like some of the things with the Falkland Islands and Margaret Thatcher. It is really trying to embrace this celebrity. So I really do think that is definitely a penultimate of like, we're gonna have this international film. So like, yeah, that's definitely a part of it, but not something I'm thinking about at the moment, but definitely something in the future. So yes, thank you for that question.
And I have feelings about the movie and the ways in which late 90s to early 2000 motion picture transfers of Broadway musicals end up making unpleasant protagonists pleasant by moving the
Yeah, and like Chicago and stuff. Yeah.
right
We've
Chicago
had that
and
conversation,
9
yeah.
and this like, oh yeah, you go ahead, sing Another Suitcase, Another Hall. Let's make you a sympathetic character, and let's add a song to make you more sympathetic. But that wasn't what I was going to say. I was wondering if one has Lapone, because that whole thing about Lapone, like I'm not really interested in politics. I don't want to talk with. Has she spoken since about that? But also, was the popular press response as we start to see Broadway musicals, and this isn't the beginning of it, but it's amid it, Broadway musicals darken. Was there a similar pushback against musicals in general, or maybe a not necessarily, not always getting the musical because of a desire to receive them as the ones that we thought were all happy, and even though they were all racist and whatever?
So like similar things happen with Chicago as well. Like it gets heavily panned by the critics as well, but this is before this point of the huge marketing push. So to answer that for at least like with Evita, the push with so that goes back to the FACT, or the First American Congress of Theater. Their goal, they already knew in 1974 that the critics were not a great way to go about things, but they were free, or like as free as you get. All you have to do is give them a comp ticket and they show up. For something like Follies, they were only, like, I looked at Bryant was the marketer for Follies, and they were barely paying a couple $100s a week for the marketing. Versus this, it was millions. This push for a counter narrative really comes at this time. And the weird thing with Evita is that Bryant was starting to set up a lot of those interviews and stuff with Lapone before it came to Broadway. Like, she was starting to schedule it, and she was seeing if it was possible to even do it when Lapone was in LA, but no one wanted to do it while it was in LA. They wanted to do it once it got to Broadway. So it's this weird thing of, it's a counter narrative, but it was already pre-planned that it was going to be such. So yeah, it was scheduled ahead of time, but all of those responses are a way of reacting against what the critics are saying. And Lapone in this interview, I unfortunately could not include all of it, but at some point she goes and talks about the wonderful orphanages that the Perrons had, and at some point she just goes like, oh wait, I sound like I am pro-Perron, I'm gonna get a whole bunch of hate mail, and then like ends the interview. After that, I have not really found, I mean, there's so much Lapone like hating on Lloyd Webber, but I haven't found anything of her like trying to counter what her earlier stance was with this. And I'm still digging, and I really do want to find like her current thoughts are. So yes, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, I was, thank you so much, Sam. It's, yes, this was so wonderful. And I guess one of the things that I really appreciate about your work is that it demonstrates how all of this extra textual material is so fundamental to what the musical becomes in musical theater history, and that we need to pay attention to all of the things around it, which you do so beautifully here. Yeah, I mean, I just had to throw in Lapone's great quotation about Andrew Lloyd, the Evita could only have been written by a man who hates women, who forces her to scream for 2 hours, and you know, she hates. I mean, there's so many great things that she has said, including amazing things that you quoted here. Yeah. But my question was actually about what was going on at this moment that made made Mary Bryant and kind of the powers that be understand the power of the tourist industry. I mean, was there increased flight? Was it cheaper to fly across the country? Was it transportation? Like, what was going on?
So yes, that is actually, like, a lot of things are happening, partially coincidentally, partially a lot of lobbying all at the same time. So we do get in 1978, the deregulation of flying is a lot cheaper. The I Love New York campaign launches the year before. So we have nationwide commercials at that point, along with travel packages to New York City. There are like 16 of them with orchestra front rows, like orchestra seats for Broadway musicals. And Bryant, before Evita, is trying out spectacle-filled type of promotional events with, like, on the 20th Century, she paired with Amtrak for, like, if you saw the show, and if you saw On the 20th Century in New York, then you could go to Grand Central Station and have champagne with the cast, and then take the Lakeshore train then from there to Chicago with part of the cast. Yeah. Yeah, like, so when Amanda was talking about that this morning, I was just like, this sounds like Mary Bryant. So it's building up to this point, and like she's testing things out here and there, or like she does the commercials for Sweeney Todd, but it's not to the level of what this thing is. And part of that, I think, has to do with the money that the money that Robert Stigwood has, the producer, because at this point, he's also doing Saturday Night Fever, which is making a ton of money. And Evita had the concept album West End and LA all before this, so it already was showing, all right, it's a viable show to toss all this money at. Yeah, thank you, Stacey.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just so people know, our How Prince collection includes his annotated directing script.
Okay. And our third speaker is Shoshana Greenberg, who received her MFA from the Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program at NYU and has been developing multiple musicals and operas as lyricist and librettist. She created the female and non-binary composers on Broadway and off-Broadway timelines for the Maestra organization, created and hosts the musical theater podcast Scene to Song. I'm going to find you there. Currently on its 8th season, serves on the board of the Thornton Wilder Society and has written for numerous theater publications from Theater Mania to American Theater Magazine. So let's welcome Shoshana.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here speaking and be part of this with all of you. So I guess I'll just start with asking the question that others have asked about their shows, is just how many people have heard of Inner City, the musical Inner City? Great, so a few people. So I'm mainly today going to kind of give an overview of the show, its writers, and why it's important in musical theater history. So the musical Inner City first came to my attention because of composer and music director Rob Baumgartner, who was with me at the Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program at NYU. And he reached out to me in 2017 because he and a man named Michael Boyd were putting together an inner city concert at 54 Below and thought I might be interested in the first Broadway musical to have a score solely written by women. Of course, I was interested. I guess I had written many articles on this topic, and so he sought me out. But the question is it true that this is the first musical to have a score solely written by women? And a look through the Maestro timeline shows that in the early years of Broadway, there were some productions with scores solely by women: Claire Kummer, Elsie Janis, Anne Rennell. Many of those may fall into the category of play with music or Follies revues, and few of those were composer and lyricist collaborations. So it's probably more likely to be said that this is the first Broadway musical in the modern musical theater era, post-Golden Age and on, to have a score written by women in collaboration. And it followed about 40 years of very few women composers writing for the Broadway stage, which we saw the other day in the Maestro timeline. And Inner City ushered in a fertile decade of women composers on Broadway in the 70s, including Mickey Grant, Elizabeth Swados, and Carol Hall, and that continues to today. So let's look at the women who wrote Inner City. They were lyricist Eve Merriam and composer Helen Miller. No one knows how these two writers came to write together. It's a question that I've been trying to find out. However, Miriam's son Dee, whom I spoke to, said that they did meet before the writing on Inner City began, and then pitched it to the producers or director. So this will, be an area of further research when I visit Eve Merriam's papers at the Schlesinger Library at Harvard. Perhaps there is something there. So I find Eve Merriam to be a fascinating figure. She was born in Philadelphia, like me, in 1916 as Eva Moskowitz. She was a poet, playwright, screenwriter, director, teacher, feminist, the list goes on. She wrote books such as Growing Up Female in America, 10 Lives. She wrote the first televised program on women's history, narrated by Mary Tyler Moore, and aired for the US Bicentennial. She's primarily seen as a poet. She wrote a trilogy of books about poetry in the early 60s with such fun titles as There Is No Rhyme for Silver, It Doesn't Always Have to Rhyme, and Catch a Little Rhyme, among many other volumes of poetry dealing with political and feminist issues. Fun fact, she was also friends with Arthur Lawrence in college, and apparently the inspiration for his character, Katie Morosky, in The Way We Were, played by Barbra Streisand. But we're here today because Miriam wrote The Inner City Mother Goose, which looks like a children's book. And whether this is actually for kids or not is debatable, though Miriam has stated that it was written for adults and in at least some libraries was placed in the adult section. Miriam takes Mother Goose rhymes and rewrites them to be about inner city life in the late 1960s. Published in 1969, it became one of the most banned books in the country in the 1970s, as many people deemed it inappropriate for children. Some examples of verses are, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the double lock will keep, may no brick through the window break, and no one rob me till I wake. And the shortest poem, which you can kind of see blurry up there, is there was a crooked man, and he did very well. There's less known about composer Helen Miller's life, but she worked at the famous Brill Building in New York City and was a staff writer at Alden Music. She began her career in the late 1940s, writing with songwriter Faye Whitman Manis, another women composer lyricist collaboration, with the song Am I Asking Too Much, recorded by Dinah Washington, which hit #1 on the US R&B charts in 1948. She wrote many popular songs at the time, including Gene Pitney's It Hurts to Be in Love, Barbara Lewis's Make Me Your Baby, Leslie Gore's All of My Life, the Shirelles' Foolish Little Girl, and Patty Michael's They're Dancing Now. 28 of her songs made the charts. But as a writing team, Miller and Merriam never wrote another musical together. Merriam continued to write plays with music, some considered more musicals than plays, such as Viva Reviva at Berkshire Theatre Festival in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, in August 1977, which you can see in this New York Times write-up is listed as a musical, but sometimes listed as a play elsewhere. Another one, Lady Macbeth of Westport at Ithaca College in 1979, may have either been a musical or a play with music. And she also wrote with composer Irma Jurist, who was represented on Broadway with the musical review Alive and Kicking. They had written the song The July Tree, which was recorded by Nina Simone in 1965, though it's unclear if they wrote together after Inner City. But Merriam's biggest theatrical hit was called The Club, which is billed as either a play with music or a musical review or cabaret. The piece is about members of an all-male club in the early 1900s, all played by women, and the songs are all period songs from that era. The production played off-Broadway in 1976, directed by Tommy Tune, and was nominated for 2 Drama Desk Awards for Unique Theatrical Experience and as Outstanding Director. It also won an Obie Award for Distinguished Production. While Eve Merriam and Helen Miller are, of course, the focus of this presentation, but Inner City also had many fascinating collaborators. The director was, and co-conceiver was Tom O'Horgan, who was just coming off a string of hits like Hair, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Lenny. Some even speculate that people were looking to take O'Horgan down a notch, and that could account for Inner City's bad reception. More on that later. But regardless, Inner City fit right into O'Horgan's concept musical aesthetic. Inner City is all songs and monologues. There is no plot, no character arcs. But no matter what people thought of Inner City, one person was roundly praised, and that was performer Linda Hopkins. She went on to win a Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Musical after the show had closed. And few may know that politician Harvey Milk was a producer in New York before he went out to San Francisco, and a producer on Inner City. This was his last musical that he produced. If Inner City had succeeded, he might have continued on this path. Now I want to get into the show of Inner City and some of the songs. So I'm going to start with the song Deep in the Night, which is a standout from the musical. Most of the songs have words that are taken directly from the Inner City Mother Goose book, but some are additional songs written for the piece. This is an additional song. It's particularly notable because it was covered by everyone from Barbra Streisand to the Shirelles to Etta James to Sarah Vaughan. In the musical, it begins with a very interesting intro about the men this character has been with, and how the man she would want to keep would be the one who will have sex with her while she's on her period. Truly something only a woman would probably write about, and not something usually talked about in a Broadway musical up until this point. I want to play the intro so you guys can hear what that sounds like.
It is hard to do without a man's smell in the house. But there's something about a man smells different from a woman. More like a horse, but good and sweet. Last night I need a man back in the house so bad I could not sleep at all, and could hardly wait for it to be morning, and the kids get up and just everything to do. I turn over in bed and I play a game. If you have to have one man, just one man in the house for the rest of your life, who would it be? Now, I would not take the first one. And he's so surprised to find that I had never been before. And I would not take Mr. Big Sport either. Have another drink, girl. Okay, girl, come on now, let's go. But the one I would want to keep, I know who that would be. The one who first took me during my time and I was hurting inside. No, I said we gotta wait. But he touched me so gentle. Oh, so gentle, and just relaxed me all out. Now she's flowing, he say. Beautiful, beautiful river. Beautiful, beautiful woman river. And I love him for that. For nobody could ever say anything bad to me about that man.
There's also a video clip of Linda Hopkins on YouTube singing this song, which is great to see. I'm not going to play it right now for time, but you can look that up on YouTube just to see her actually performing the song. The next song I want to highlight is Hushabye, My Mama Said. This lyric is taken from the book and set to music. This is Paulette Ellen Jones singing a plaintive song about being young and pregnant, and I wanted to include it as an example of a song from the show that both uses the Mother Goose rhyme but also feels like a musical theater song as she works through her situation, both the violent one she's coming from with her parents and the new situation she will have with her baby, whom she wants a better life for. The Hushabye section serves as an intro, and then it moves into the My Mama Said song proper. I'm just going to play a little bit of that as well.
Hushabye, baby, on the top floor. Project elevator won't work anymore. It comes up to 10 and then starts to stall. We'll have to walk down, baby, carriage and all. My mother said I never should turn out to be anything good. Everything I did, she'd say, bad, bad girl to disobey.
Okay, I'll stop there. The inner city cast recording is available for purchase online, so feel free to check out all these songs and the entire album. Another song I want to highlight is Starlight, Star Bright. I wanted to just include it here because it is one of the songs that did not make it onto the cast recording, I guess for space issues, but it was done at the 54 Below concert in 2017 and now thankfully preserved on YouTube. It's a beautiful round about how people in the city never see the stars. You can see the lyrics up here from the book. Rob Baumgartner, who I mentioned previously, did the arrangement for this. I'm not going to play the YouTube video for time, but please definitely look that up. And then finally, the finale song. The finale is actually two songs, starting with The Great If and moving into On This Rock, and then ends back with The Great If. The Great If says, quoting the lyrics, "If all the seas were one sea, what a great sea that would be. If all the slums were one slum, what a great slum that would be. And if all the axes were one axe, what a great axe that would be. And if all the men were one man, what a great man that would be. And if the great man took the great axe and cut down the great slum and let it fall into the great sea, what a great if that would be." It's wistful, hopeful, very much in the conditional. In contrast, On This Rock says, and I quote the lyrics, "I'm a city woman, I'm a city man. On this rock I make my stand. I'm a stubborn woman, I'm a stubborn man. On this rock I make my stand." It's a song of defiance, very declarative, and it continues, "No lock, no gate, no fear, no hate can drive me away. Here I stay where I feel the most alive, in this crazy, crowded, greatest show on earth, in this manic, magic, mad menagerie." I'm going to play a little bit of that as well.
If all the seas were one sea, what a great sea that would be. If all the slums were one slum, what a great slum that would be. And if all the axes were one axe, what
off it there. But Eve Merriam said in the liner notes, "Dear friends, may you be encouraged to make your own stand, and may we all help one another to make the great if the great reality." And she signed it with inner city love and stubbornness. So the reviews for Inner City were mixed. Overall, there were 3 favorable reviews, 4 mixed reviews, and 5 unfavorable, according to the New York Times review count. And one of the unfavorable ones was the New York Times. Clive Barnes from the New York Times said, "With great wit, this music is so unmemorable that you cannot remember it," while noting that there are some good things, but not enough. Walter Kerr of the Times also chimed in with, "So far as I'm concerned, they can throw away the rest of Inner City and just let a lady named Linda Hopkins stand there all night, tapping one foot slightly, opening her composed mouth to let miraculous sounds come out of it." Again, raves for Linda Hopkins. And the Village Voice was particularly Village Voicey in critiquing the liberal politics of the piece with, "Inner City wants to celebrate the independence, strength, and glamour of Black rebelliousness, but can't seem to grasp that these things have meaning in terms of the Black position, not in terms of the white reaction. So the attitudes of the musical remain stuck in terms of the mechanisms of middle-class guilt, like a mirror that smashes itself over and over." Ultimately, Inner City closed on March 11th, 1972, after 24 previews and 97 performances. Linda Hopkins was the only Tony nomination and win at the 1972 Tony Awards. After Inner City's failure on Broadway, Merriam and Miller revised the piece, which is now called Street Dreams, the Inner City musical. This is the version that gets licensed today by Concord Theatricals. Here's a logo from the Wilmington Drama League's production in 2023. Many who worked on or saw the original say they prefer the original to the revised version, which tried to include more of a plot that they tried to put onto the show. So when Rob Baumgartner and Michael Boyd did the reunion concert at 54 Below in 2017, they had to reconstruct many of the arrangements from Inner City and piece it back together. Rob had reached out to the orchestrator, who had no idea where anything was. So part of that process was using cast recordings and bootlegs to piece together the orchestrations. And I was fortunate to see that concert with gospel singer Yolanda Wins in the Linda Hopkins role. Michael Boyd, who was working on one day getting Inner City a major revival, however, he passed away in 2020. And with his death, the forward momentum on the piece has stalled. According to Rob Baumgartner, there had been interest in the piece. However, those people wanted to update it and bring on a book writer, but Michael didn't want to do that. He was a purist with this piece. He had seen it as a teenager multiple times and wanted to preserve the integrity of the piece if it was going to move forward. Michael Boyd was very much the champion of this piece. As I said, he saw it multiple times over its short run and did so much work on maintaining its legacy, speaking with Merriam and Miller themselves before they passed away, as well as with many others involved. Fortunately, I was able to interview him for my podcast, Scene to Song, a few months before he passed so that we can all hear his story and thoughts on the show. I'd like to wrap up with a story he told on that podcast, a firsthand account of a school group who attended the production of Inner City.
You told me the story that Eve Merriam, I guess, told you about a story of a high school group.
Oh, I was there.
Oh, you were there?
I was there.
Okay, so.
I was there. One of the things they were doing everything they could to save good audiences and save the show. They were having lots of church groups come because of the gospel element.
Right.
But they also reached out to a lot of inner city high schools for trips. And on one matinee day, an inner city high school came. And I was just a high school kid myself. And they had a talk back with the cast after the show. So I just pretended I was part of the school.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Stayed, so there's me and all these kids from Harlem.
Yeah, right.
Who, by the way, loved the show.
Yeah.
They were cheering throughout the whole thing. They just loved it.
Yeah.
Probably because they had not seen themselves represented so honestly
Right.
in any form of entertainment at that point.
Yeah.
So the cast comes out and they're cheering, they're talking, they're asking cast questions. And one of the cast members, I think it was Larry Marshall, actually said, would you guys like to meet the person who wrote this show, lady who wrote this show? She's here. I see her standing over there. And they're like, yes, absolutely. We want to meet this woman. We want to meet her.
Yeah.
So he says, Eve, come on out on stage. And this small, frail, middle-aged white woman walks out.
Right.
And the room went silent. They didn't know what to say.
Right.
They had just seen the show that was like so pro-black and da-da-da. And like,
Yeah.
she wrote this?
Yeah.
And there was just silence. And finally, there was this one girl, big girl with a big afro, I never forget her. She goes, lady, did you really write this show? And Eve goes, yes, I did. And she goes, well, all I have to say to you is, when the revolution comes, you will be protected. We will take care of you.
I love it. I love that story.
And of course, at that point, the whole audience, all the kids started cheering.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it was really a wonderful moment.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of moments that this show generated
Right.
on so many different levels.
And now I hope you've gotten a sense of this hidden gem in musical theater history, inner city, and why it should be seen as an important milestone for women writers, thanks to the work of Miller and Merriam, who were fascinating figures in the musical theater canon. Thank you.
All right. We have time for just maybe one or two questions. I'll ask one real quick. Did the composer Merriam?
The composer Helen Miller.
Miller. Did she write the arrangements and the orchestration as well?
That's a good question. I am not sure if she did the arrangements and orchestration.
It sounded like Hair a little bit here and there, and also the notation. Maybe it's a Samuel French thing, but it looks very similar to like Michael Serban, like all those those orchestrators starting in the 70s. So I was just curious if you know who was making the arrangements for this.
I do not off the top of my head, but I can find out. Yeah.
And no worries if you have no answer. I was delighted to see you mention the club because I've seen some archival material on the Japanese premiere directed by Tommy Tune, and I just wondered. I didn't know if Eve Merriam went to Japan, or if you had come across the Japanese production or heard of other international productions of that show.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Eve's, other work in too much detail. I know there is a biography in the works on her by scholar Julia Mickelberg, I think, that is in the works, and she would probably have more information on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's really fantastic to be introduced to a musical. I did not realize there was something before the club, so this is really cool. I'm curious if you know the musical The Me Nobody Knows, which seems to be in direct conversation with this, which I think opened a year or two later to similarly mixed reviews. 76.
Yeah, I do not know that show personally. I know that the people that I've been in contact with for this presentation, who also were working on Inner City, like Rob Baumgartner, are also big fans of that show as well. So I know there is some crossover in terms of.
Yeah, and probably a lot of anxiety about white people writing shows about Black youth. Yeah. Might just be something to put in conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so it's 3:30, so we're going to break, but feel free to come here and talk to the panelists, but let's also thank Shoshana and the panelists.